Good evening. My name is Larry Ward, President of the University of Hartford. Welcome to campus. We are so delighted to serve as a host for this important conversation. When I came back to Connecticut after 30 years away, I was raised governor in Vernon, Connecticut. I was so delighted to take on the leadership of this institution. And one of the things that I thought was so important, particularly being a university that carries the city of Hartford's name, is to demonstrate active leadership in this region and in this state. I think it's so important for there to be a strong connection between our institutions of higher ed, our elected leaders, the press, and the business community and the community at large. And so we are absolutely delighted to welcome you here today. Even though these are challenging times, we certainly feel optimistic about our work on this campus and about our state and about our state's leadership. I want to thank Governor Lamont and his office for their support, and we look forward to creating many good things together as we go forward. We also appreciate the opportunity to be in partnership with the Connecticut Mirror and to have them here and leading this conversation. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Governor Lamont and our moderator, John Dankosky.
Thank you. Thank you so much, President Ward, and thank you so much to the University of Hartford for putting on this event. Whenever I talk to my good friend Bilal Sakou, I always end my introduction to him by saying, "Go Hawks!" So go Hawks. I don't know how many Hawks fans there are here, but we have to do that while we're on campus. This is part of the In the Room series. It's an ongoing series of live conversations. We're starting off the second season of this with the big dog, Governor Ned Lamont. We're going to be talking throughout the course of this year with Connecticut's top elected officials, and we're so glad to have you along, both in person and also virtually. I've got to give a few thank yous before we get started, Governor. I want to thank the generous financial supporters of the Connecticut Mirror's In the Room series, our presenting sponsor Eversource, amplifying sponsors CBIA and Mohegan Tribe, the publishing sponsors Express Strategies, Hinckley Allen, Rowthorne Law LLC, and the Causeway Agency, and of course all the folks at the Connecticut Mirror and everyone here at the University of Hartford who helped to make this happen. I will say that we had requested some questions from our audience beforehand when you signed up for this event, so we do have certainly a few from folks who signed up here in advance. If you're watching this at home, you'd like to sign up for a future event, you can go to ctmirror.org/events and sign up. You can also click that donate button and help to support all of the great nonprofit, nonpartisan journalism that we do here at the Connecticut Mirror. There was a big hearing down in Washington today taking on nonprofit journalism, and I just want you to know that it's alive and well, and it will continue because of people like you. Okay, first of all, Governor Ned Lamont, welcome back to our series. It's good to see you once again. Thanks for coming.
Nice to see you, John. Great to be back at the University of Hartford.
So, how's your arm?
Bit better, actually. Taj Hotel, Mumbai, marble, water, bad combination.
It's a bad combination. So I'm sorry. I hope that you're feeling better soon. Do you have PT and that sort of thing? Is it going to take a while to fix?
They say at my age it takes a little longer to fix.
So they made the point of that if you were a younger man, that maybe you would heal a little bit faster. The thing that struck me and so many other people is you said that you got your bad wing fixed up for about $10 over there.
Yeah, I wiped out. Security came running in. Then a nurse came. Then they take you to an x-ray place. It's not the most modern x-ray place, but it was an x-ray. They got taken done. Then they give me a sling. Then I'm back out. And for $10, it was all taken care of. I went down and talked to all these Indian business guys, and I said, "You just fixed my wing for $10. You're amazing." And they said, "You were ripped off."
Okay, so what did that teach you about the U.S. health system?
I think it's really messy, our health system. It's incredibly expensive. Access is not universal. And I think we have a lot to learn from what's going on overseas.
Specifically, what do you think that we could learn? Because obviously, doctors in America aren't going to work at a rate that allows them to charge $10 for a broken arm. That having been said, just like you had that experience, I've had experiences of having to go to emergency facilities in tiny little towns in places like Costa Rica or places like very rural Italy, and you can't really get the most modern services, but you can give somebody $50 and they'll take care of you. You don't have to wait forever. You don't have to have a $500 bill. And most importantly, Governor, like a lot of people in Connecticut, you don't have to lose your house if you break your arm. So how do we fix that?
We have some of the highest quality health care in the world, but it's not affordable and accessible for too many of our people. I can tell you for the state of Connecticut, this thing seems loud, isn't it?
No, you sound good.
It's okay?
Yeah, you sound good.
I mean, I look at our budget, for example, the budget of the state of Connecticut, and we remember our pensions were eating us alive. We're getting that fixed. And then our bonded debt was eating us alive. We're slowly getting that fixed. Not health care. Medicaid is going like that. Retiree health care costs, they're going up at, double digits at this point. It's utilization, the high cost of pharma, and we got to be working with the federal government as well to see what we can do to make healthcare more affordable and universally available for everybody at a reasonable cost.
So, but what does that look like? I mean, we need to be working with the federal government, but states like ours have been trying to do that in some way for years and years and years, and it's only gotten more expensive. Healthcare premiums for every single person who gets healthcare through their insurers just goes through the roof each and every year, including from insurance companies that are based right here in Connecticut. And we don't ever seem to do anything about it. Like, if you could wave a wand with your good hand, what would you do to change this?
Well, what you can do at the state level is different from what you can do at the federal level. Federal, you could look at something like what they have in Canada, make that universally available, paid for by companies or taxpayers, and but at the state level, you can't do that. You've got to do what you can do. We've made proposals, for example, something called reference pricing. We'll pay up to 250% of Medicare for every single state employee, but I got to negotiate that with the hospitals, and they see a lot of risk there. Pharmaceuticals, we've got a proposal in right now. I don't want to do anything to discourage innovation, especially given the life sciences and everything that's going on in the greater New Haven area. It's booming. We're a pharmaceutical innovator. But once those drugs are, off patent, once they're generic, why do they have to go up in price in double digits anymore? We have a proposal before our legislature to see if we can sort of slow down the price increase at that point, give you guys a little bit of a break.
Of course, there's a lot of concern from people inside and outside your party about what is happening in Washington with the possibilities of further Medicaid cuts. We've already talked about reimbursements for doctors being very, very poor, people wanting to get out of the Medicaid services business. Now it looks as though there could be further cuts happening. What do we do about that?
We've got a lot of incoming from Washington, D.C. these days. And
this is just the first page, Governor.
I can't tell you what it's all going to be. I think probably the biggest risk right now is Medicaid, as you point out. Let's say our overall Medicaid budget in the state of Connecticut is, say, $11 billion. That's half paid for by you, the taxpayers of the state, and half paid for by the federal government. Also you. And so
you're welcome.
The DOGE Commission was going to run around saying, we're going to save money, we're going to cut Medicaid costs by 15%. They're not really saving anybody any money, they're just going to push those costs onto the state. For us, let's say it was 10%, save, do the math easily, 10% of $5 billion would be about a $500 million hit to our budget. Then you got to figure out how do we manage that? They say, well, let's have a work requirement. That seems to make pretty good sense. Then why is somebody on Medicaid? They should be working. And then you realize that 3/4 of the people on Medicaid are working right now. They just their employer doesn't provide health insurance for them. So then you say, well, maybe their employer should provide health insurance. These are all the type of modeling, John, we're going through as we don't know what to expect, but we got to be ready.
Well, we can talk more about what this all means for healthcare, but since you mentioned DOGE by name, you've spent quite a bit of time personally in the tech industry, and you know a lot of folks in Connecticut and outside Connecticut around the world who work in this industry. What do you think about a bunch of tech guys who get enabled by the federal government to just go in and like change stuff around and cut thousands and thousands of jobs in the name of efficiency. I mean, broadly, what do you think of this idea?
Well, I'm the first governor to come out of the private sector in a while, so I was certainly somebody that said I think government can deliver better quality of service at less cost, and I do think technology is part of the answer. But this guy's going in with a chainsaw. You probably saw that video. And right now they're doing a lot of really heavy-handed, unanticipated cuts. Right now, they're all in the formative stage, but I've spent a lot of time trying to, work with secretaries and stuff down in Washington. It's my job. I got to have relationships there, and they're not sure what they're doing right now. And even if HHS or Dr. Oz thinks they can do something, it still has to go through the White House. It still has to go through DOJ, and that is a loose missile.
It's a problem in a lot of sectors. You were talking before about healthcare and innovation. This is another thing that a lot of people across the sector in places like New Haven, for instance, that have really made an economy around what they call meds and eds. There's a lot of concern that federal cuts to just basic research, basic medical research, are not only going to hurt places like New Haven and other parts of Connecticut, but they're also going to leave Connecticut and America somewhat crippled when it comes to innovation around healthcare. Is that a concern for you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the great strengths we have as a state and what we have as a country is the power of our universities. Folks from around the world want to come to our universities. You used to have Bell Labs. Now you have university research, like you point out, John. So not only is it an elevator for opportunity for people and make sure you have the best trained workforce in the world and the best and the brightest from around the world want to come to the United States and come to Connecticut, and also the research and the ideas, what you see coming out of Yale University and all the life sciences building from there is just an example of that. And we're just, taking away the seed corn, taking away our future when you say we're not going to invest in research, we're going to downgrade or downplay our universities. I think it's really short-sighted what we're doing to our universities, in particular research.
What do you think that you or the state of Connecticut could or should do about that?
Get a new president? That'd be kind of helpful. I'll tell you one thing I do. I mean, I'll have this thought bubble out loud. I've got a lot of Democrats are out there doing this all the time. And every time the president says something that really boom, bang back and push back. I have a slightly different relationship and role there. One of the things I try and do is work with red state governors. And I say, let's talk about Medicaid. I say, look, Medicaid could be really damaging to a state like Connecticut, and some of our rural hospitals may not make it with those type of cuts. But Alabama and Kentucky, let me tell you what it's going to mean to you. Maybe we don't always agree on the President of the United States and Donald Trump, but maybe we can agree on Medicaid. So you say, how am I trying to move the ball? That's one way I'm doing it, trying to get some red state, blue state confluence there.
Oh, so that's good, because I want to talk a lot about, how exactly you and governors like you are able to deal with what's coming out of Washington, because there is so much. But talk a bit more about what those conversations are like with red state governors. You and I have spoken about this in the past. I mean, it's a lot different when you get behind closed doors with someone who has a job like yours in a place like Kentucky, and you may have voted for different people, but you still got to serve people the same way. What are those conversations like right now?
These governors are pretty good. We all got to pave the road and provide education and deal with health care in similar ways. You can be a red state or a blue state, and you got different constituencies. Once the door is shut, we have a lot in common. We share that together. Once the door is open, you get in front of a microphone, everybody starts getting very political again. But quietly, there's a lot of conversations going on, John. And whether I can get some red state governors to go forward. They get terrified of primaries, and you can see how nervous they are in Congress. But I think when the rubber meets the road, when you start seeing the impact of these cuts on people's lives, let's start with health care, you're going to get some response.
You had, my friend Mark Pasniokis from the Connecticut Mirror had written a piece about this and how you view yourself in terms of working with or against Donald Trump. He put it as engaging Trump without appeasing or provoking. Does that sound a bit like your tactic, like how you think about it?
I think there's something to that. I think Paz got that about right. Look, you draw the line in life. Let's talk about immigration. Let's say that was probably the animating issue for Donald Trump and his voters. And if you say, look, we ought to be more serious about security at the border, I say, look, I'm with you. I'm not. I think you're probably right. If they say we have folks, criminals on the street, the president seems to think every immigrant is a criminal on the street. The degree to which they are criminals on the street, we are there. We're working with you. We're doing everything we can to keep you safe. But you draw the line in life as well. If they say, I've got that 17-year-old girl at West Hartford High School who came to this country at the age of 2 from Guatemala, and ICE wants to go and pick her up and send her back to Guatemala, I'm not playing in that game. So you got to draw the line as well. I don't go out of my way to pick a fight, but I also know the lines that won't be crossed.
Talk a bit more about what exactly that line means for you. So what happens if ICE shows up in Connecticut and wants to start hassling or rounding up people that you think they shouldn't be? What exactly does Connecticut do about that?
So we have something called the Trust Act. It was put together by the legislature. I signed it. I thought it made pretty good sense. What it says is, look, if there's a criminal out there, level A or level B felony, we will work with the feds to make sure that those people are not out in the street, and we do that. But you can't ask our state police, you can't ask our municipal policemen if somebody is jaywalking or speeding or committing a minor crime. We're not in the immigration business. We're not asking you your immigration status. So I don't fight with ICE and say, no way I'm going to help you. I'm just saying that's not information we have, so I'm not going to participate in that. We can't participate in that.
One thing that we've seen, though, and this was also in Mark's article, the president picked on someone you know very well, Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, over some policies that her state has that are very similar to policies that Connecticut has. Not specifically about immigration, but it doesn't really matter the topic, Governor, because if you run afoul of this president and say, I'm not going to help when ICE comes in, or I'm not going to change a law that has something to do with transgender athletes, you could very well be the subject of his next rant and tirade. So how exactly do you think about that? Have you thought about, for instance, if he'd called on you instead of Janet Mills and said, Ned Lamont's the real problem here? I mean, how do you stand up to that?
So I was sitting there in the East Room. It was the National Governors meeting, and the president comes in. He was going to give us the 15-minute update, and he'd gone on for a little over an hour. And then he goes, I hate Maine. Where's that governor of Maine and all those trans runners they have there? And where is she? And then he pointed to Janet Mills, who's a wonderful, feisty 75-year-old woman. And she says, I'm right here, Mr. President. He says, you have no right to do what you're doing with that, that trans girl, and I'm going to take you to court. And she just goes, I'll see you in court. And he goes, well, I am the law. And she says, no, you're not. I'll see you in court. And then they took away tens of millions of dollars of funding from her. I think most of that gets rescinded, by the way. These are threats, and then it goes back. I was there. First of all, I was kind of happy he didn't point at me. Secondly, I was really proud of Janet Mills, to tell you the truth. And thirdly, my general philosophy in life is I'm not going out of my way to pick a fight, but I'm going to stand for Connecticut values where Connecticut values are threatened.
But I know that we've all done this, Governor. You have, I have, everybody in this room has, right? Something like that happens, and you're on the drive home, and you're thinking to yourself, if he had called on me, what would I have said? What would I have done if he would have said, I hate that Connecticut, I hate Ned Lamont, you need to change that, I'm the law? What do you say?
I thought Janet Mills handled it just right. She was sitting there minding her own business, not looking to pick any fight or anything like that. When challenged, she said, I believe in the rule of law, and I'm going to see you in a court of law because nobody's above the law. I think she said it just right.
Speaking of things that the president has been talking an awful lot about, he's been talking about an energy crisis in America. He feels as though the energy problems of Connecticut in America can be solved by, drilling for more oil, drilling for more gas, and stopping all this nonsense, as he says, about wind and solar power, etc. So I guess the first thing I have to ask you is, Connecticut has been, along with other Northeast neighbors, on the forefront of trying to get America into a better place regarding emissions, regarding clean energy. The president wants to roll that back. What is your stated policy about what Connecticut is going to do if the governor starts saying, or if the president starts saying, no more wind power, it's all going to be gas and oil from here on in?
Give me 2 minutes on this, because we spent a lot of time on this. First elected, we're running out of electricity in this, part of the country. We've got some friends from Eversource here. They can tell you that we need more generating capacity. So the first thing I did, I don't know where you stand on this, but I doubled down on our relationship with Millstone, the nuclear power plant. Always on carbon-free power at 5 cents a kilowatt hour. And that helps stabilize that. But that said, John, we need new additional sources of power as well, starting with low carbon or carbon-free power. We did a wind power, Revolution Wind off of New London. That turns on in about a year. That's about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. We're bringing down solar from Maine. You say, what, Maine? Foggy Maine? What are you bringing down solar from there? They got, thousands of acres. They can do it on land where it's a lot less expensive. And we're bringing that down at about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. We still need more power. That's not going to get it done for us. So we have had some conversations about natural gas. I'd love your point of view on this. Natural gas is about 4 cents a kilowatt hour coming in by pipe. And that's a possibility as an interim way to get additional low carbon power into this region.
Okay, so there's a lot of people in the audience here.
Yep.
Who don't agree.
I knew what I was saying.
Who don't agree with this. And there's a lot of reasons why they don't agree with this. And I won't go through chapter and verse and all of them, but let's start with the idea that as we invest in gas infrastructure, we are not investing in other places. And that gas infrastructure essentially extends far into the future a reliance on fossil fuels that Connecticut has said we need to get off of. If we make those investments with our scarce resources, then frankly, we're just getting into the fossil fuel business, not for this year, not for next year, but for the next 10, 20, 100 years.
Yep. Look, I'm going to present the options to the people of Connecticut. They're going to decide. I can tell you it's much more expensive, and middle-class folks are getting hammered by electricity prices. I'm having a hard time getting manufacturing into the state because of the high price of electricity. So you've got to make trade-offs in life in terms of what you want to do. I've told you I've doubled down on renewable power, doubling down, trying to do everything I can to expand nuclear beyond what we've got right now. And that's the trade-off you got to make. We can decide we're going to have the most expensive electricity in the world and keep going the way we're going. I just don't think it's a supportable future for us.
Okay, so what is a better way forward, though? Because if these are the only options, it doesn't sound like these are particularly good options right now, right? Because as we're talking about getting electricity down from Maine, this region gets a lot of electricity coming down.
I think the solar from Maine is going to continue to expand. I think the price will go down. Wind, I've been surprised. We doubled down on wind. I did the wind at 10 cents. The last round of wind bids was 17 cents. So the prices go in the wrong direction. And President Trump's got some bee in his bonnet about wind. I don't know what he is. I mean, everybody else says all the above. He says all the above except wind. I don't know where that's coming from. That will probably not go as fast, at least for the next 4 years. I really have some hope, and I'd love your point of view on this, on what they call modular nukes. Modular nukes are a new nuclear generation, but it's not built on site. It's built off site and it's dropped in at a lot less cost and a lot less fuel emissions. We've talked a little bit to Millstone about the possibility we might be able to get some more generation there as well, which is nuclear, so I'd love your point of view on that, but it's also always on carbon-free at a lot less cost.
So when you say, and I appreciate this, and I think that the people who are here and probably the people who are watching at home appreciate the fact that you would like their opinion on this. If the people of Connecticut come back and say, honestly, Governor, we don't want any pipelines bringing in fracked gas from Pennsylvania, do you say, well then no, we're not going to have fracked gas from Pennsylvania, we might have higher electricity rates, but we're not going to do that?
Yeah, I just got to lay out the facts to people. You will pay a lot more for your electricity, but you know, we wouldn't have that wouldn't do natural gas. The problem is right now, we bring in natural gas by pipe. We also bring it in by ship. We bring it in from Europe, which is a lot leakier. So, you know, you could also replace at least that leaky ship natural gas with something else. Obviously, the best is carbon-free power like wind and solar and hydro. By the way, they're not making any more water in Canada, because I thought hydro was a natural fit for us there. But we can use it for peak. We can't use it for base load.
Well, there's one thing I was going to say, too. Amongst the many things coming out of Washington are a not terribly rosy relationship with our neighbors to the north that provide an awful lot of direct energy to this region, too, Governor. And I think that that's an important piece of this. Right now, this region hasn't exactly been shut off by Canada, but if we keep putting enormous tariffs on them, it seems as though it's possible that that's another source of electricity we ain't going to get anymore.
If Donald Trump puts a 20% tariff on hydro coming into our region, that's going to cost each and every one of us about $100 million. So we're going backwards there. And secondly, I can't figure out why he loves our enemies and hates our friends. I mean, Canada is the longest peacetime border in the history of the world. We have so much in common and shared values. We work together. And yet Putin is somebody he seems to play footsie with.
If we're talking about electricity prices, there's a whole lot of things in there, and probably, as you've already said, some unsavory choices that the state might have to make. What about just, you know, the utility companies that control the natural gas and electricity going in? There have been some lawmakers who have suggested legislation that would require utility companies like Eversource, one of our sponsors tonight, to split apart gas and electric companies. It's an effort to rein in costs. They say that these are massive corporate monopolies. Do you agree?
I'll look at the bill. I don't quite know what difference it would make, but you know, the other thing makes a big difference, which we control ourselves right now, we can do without having to worry about overseas people, is energy efficiency. We're doing about $500 million a year. It's incredible how much energy you can save in your home, which saves you money. And any kilowatt you're not using is not going into the air either as pollution. And I've got a lot of debates going on with the legislature right now about do we pay for that or not, and I think we should continue to subsidize it. I think we should continue to grow that. I think it's part of our clean energy future.
Aside from the bill that I mentioned, are there discussions that you think you could or should have with utilities here in Connecticut that might change the price structure of electricity? I mean, is this all just about supply and demand? We don't have enough electricity or enough gas coming in, or does this have something to do with the companies that provide that stuff?
I go back and forth with the utilities. There's no question about it. But 95% of the problem is supply and demand. You know, the utilities, you know, they don't make any money on gas or wind. All they do is pass that through. What they do is they build out the grid. And I've got to have a good, constructive working relationship with Eversource and UI to make sure they continue to upgrade the grid. You know, sometimes we play games and we say it's all the energy efficiency stuff that's driving up the cost of your electric bills. I say just the opposite. Energy efficiency is bringing down the cost of your bills. But we have to have a constructive relationship there.
They do make quite a bit of money doing this, though.
Yes, they would tell you not enough. But, it's a balance. I've got a commissioner who I think the world of. Her name is Marissa Gillette. She got a lot of grief. She got a lot of grief from the utilities, and they thought she was too hard on them and not fair. I said, you're holding them accountable, and I think that's the right thing to do. And I wish you would tell your legislators, give Marissa a vote. She's up before the legislature to be renominated as chairperson again, and she actually comes out of the regulatory world. She knows what she's doing in that sense. Usually we have really nice guys, retired legislators. They sit on the board, and you say 70, I say 90. We split the difference at 80, but she's a lot tougher than that. I think that's good, but you got to be tough but fair, because Eversource and UI are also our partners in the future.
It's about halfway through our event tonight, and at the risk of just barraging you with questions about things that Donald Trump is doing that is making your job difficult, maybe we'll just take a break here midstream and say a few things. One is thank you to everyone who wrote in so many questions to me. A lot of these questions aren't verbatim. I've been sort of consolidating them, and a lot of those things, Governor, that I just went through are a lot of the questions that people were asking. I'll just stop as an intermission and ask one myself. What was it like to give that award to Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones recently?
I created the award so I could give it to him.
First, before you say that, I got this email that there was some big award coming out to some prominent Connecticut resident, and I was like, damn, that was nice of him to give me an award. And then I found out that it wasn't, and it was just Keith Richards. I had the same thought. You created it just to give it to Keith Richards.
Well, I got a Grateful Dead belt on, but I've been to like 10 Rolling Stones things, and I just figured Keith Richards, I think he's one of the coolest human beings on earth. You could have lived anywhere in the world, Soho, the Village, south of France, and he chose Weston, Connecticut, which I thought was just amazing. And, I talked to him a little bit beforehand, which was one of the great joys of my job, and he prefers talking with a guitar, to tell you the truth, but, I said, how'd you end up in Weston? And, I thought, my wife had a cousin, and he said, no, just like a lot of folks, my kids were not seeing any sunshine. The air was sort of dirty down there in New York City. We decided to have a change, and somebody said there's a piece of land in a place called Weston. And so the real estate broker is standing there and saying, who is this person that wants to buy this land? And in comes this super mega rock star in his Rolls Royce. He's got the bandanas and coming and said, I'll take it right now. And he built a house. And you know what he called his house? Camelot Cost a Lot. Anyway, he likes Connecticut, so I like him.
Well, no, of course, and you said it was one of the great joys of your life. That must be one of the cool things about the job. Every once in a while, because you're a governor, a lot of people line up because they want to talk to you. Every once in a while, you probably get to meet someone who's like, damn, I got to meet Keith Richards. It feels good, doesn't it?
Everybody wanted to go. It was a lot of fun. I think he had some fun, too. But then he was supposed to meet some people afterwards, because these were the friends of the library down at Westport. And he looks around the corner. There are 50 people ready to shake his hand, and he got the hell out of Dodge as fast as he could. He just left.
All right. Well, the intermission's over, Governor. What happens to Connecticut if the Department of Education is dismantled?
I think it's the dumbest thing we can do. The rest of the world is prioritizing education. We talked about what education means in terms of research,
sure,
what it means in terms of opportunity, an elevator. One of our great strengths as a state is the quality of our education. We have one of the great K through 12. And, I've got Linda McMahon from Connecticut is head of the Department of Education. And her predecessor was from Connecticut as well, Miguel. We have great, at least we have secretaries of education from Connecticut. And here's what it would mean. It's about $500 million. But John, I don't want to scare people. Just because they want to repurpose the Department of Education doesn't mean they're going to cut off that flow of funding. A lot of it's Title I, that goes to kids with special needs, it goes to disadvantaged communities. I'd like to think that funding is going to continue. Whether they trim it, I don't know. But I do think it doesn't make any sense. Look, I was just like in India, like I said. You know what they do there? They have a national curriculum where they're teaching artificial intelligence starting at the age of 10. They're going to make sure that for the next generation, their young people, when they're working, are at the top of the game. You know, we can't leave that to 50 states and 169 communities here. There's a role for the federal government in education and priorities.
You say you're hopeful that they don't cut the amount that they're sending to states, but we don't know that, right? I mean, what is the latest on that, and what are the plans if those cuts do come? Because the money's got to come from somewhere.
I got no idea what they're going to do. You know, Linda says we have no plans to cut any of the funding going to the states, comma, then it all goes to the White House and DOJ, like I said before. You have no idea what happens when it goes through that meat grinder. What do we do, John? I mean, I got to protect the most vulnerable. That's what you do as state government, and we're not going to let people down. But I can tell you, if they cut $1 billion out of Medicaid and 150 out of education, if they cut, they cut, I don't know, 40 million or something out of public health today, I can't make up all that shortfall either. So we're working on contingencies right now.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because this is all stuff that you couldn't plan for. We didn't know what was going to happen. Last year, around this time of year, as we sat down and had one of these conversations, we spent a lot of time talking about fiscal guardrails, which I'm sure that you are glad that we didn't start with. When we talk about that and the way that the state has reined in spending over the years, in the past, a lot of people in your party have said, look, Connecticut has money, they can spend it in different ways on helping some of the less fortunate people in the state. Now we're at a position where we may have to just break open that piggy bank because we don't know what the federal government's going to do. How have you and how has your administration been viewing the notion that Connecticut's spending might have to change if the federal government cuts all that money that you count on?
Let me turn the clock back just for a minute. Go back 10, 15 years. You remember the fiscal state that this state was in. We had deficit upon deficit. We were always cutting. We've increased funding for every one of our core groups, starting with education, every year that I've been here right now. We had a very volatile revenue stream. A lot of that is like capital gains. So when the price of NVIDIA, went up, everybody was good. Then it would go down, and we had to cut again. So it was really demoralizing to the state. The head of OPM, under Dan Malloy, said we're in a chronic fiscal crisis. So I've been very careful to make sure that we continue to make the investments we need without the potential of putting our state through what we did before. And every time you have a recession, you'd either be raising taxes or cutting spending quickly. That said, our budget this year is going to go up at least $1 billion, a lot more than it ever has before, making key investments in healthcare and education and towns and cities. But I don't want to duck your question either. What happens if DOJ cuts $500 million from Medicaid? What are you going to do with those folks in the nursing homes, 75% of which are on Medicaid? And we're working on what I can do about that, how we can work with the nursing homes, how we can provide some support for people, what you do in terms of asset tests to make sure people who need it are the ones getting it right now. That's what I do worry about that a lot. I think did I mention, what we're doing on the 75% of the people on Medicaid who are working. Maybe those guys shouldn't be on Medicaid. Maybe their company, maybe Walmart should be contributing to their health insurance. That's the way that they should pay what they should be doing, and it doesn't necessarily burden the taxpayers.
Of course, as you say, that Medicaid bill is the biggest thing. It's the thing that's hanging over you. But again, I don't want to get around the idea that education cuts could really be crippling to communities, to towns and cities. What is the thought process and what is the plan for dealing with that if, again, because you don't know what's going to happen with DOJ, if indeed cuts do come that are excessive to federal spending on education?
So we have some options. What I've done this year is we're making the biggest investment in early childhood education and daycare in the history of the state, doing $300 million a year as far as it goes to make sure we have universal pre-K, universal early childhood for every single kid in this state. I think it gives them the very best opportunity in life. For me, it's a priority. And your point is, at some point, maybe you have to make choices as well. I don't want to slow down the new investments I'm making. You know, I know where you're coming from. Say you've been paying down the outstanding pension debt too fast. We're paying it down over 30 years, but you know, we're making some progress there. Maybe I make some changes there if I actually have to do it. That costs us money in the long term, as you know. There's no such thing as free money. That will cost us a lot of money. It's a lot better than where we were 10 years ago.
Well, and I think that sort of just gets to the question about decision-making in a job like yours, because I think a lot of people would say, good on Ned Lamont for thinking long-term in a job in which people tend to think in 4- and 2-year cycles, right? Like, this is a good thing, and we've made some progress on that. That having been said, in a crisis situation, like if you're bailing out a boat that's taking on water, it doesn't much matter what it looks like in 30 years. You got to get the water out the boat. And I guess I'm wondering about how you think about short-term versus long-term when it comes to the potential for crisis coming from Washington.
Right. But you got to remember, for the last 50 years, they didn't put a dime in the pensions because they always said there's a higher priority. And that left each and every one of your kids with probably a $50 billion pension hole. And that was just terribly damaging. So we've paid that down a lot. And it's also saving, John, our budget about $750 million a year. That's $750 million a year. I don't have to pay pension now because I can put that into education in towns and cities. But again, to your original point, how come you don't do more to help out people in need? Let's see what the Trump administration does, and we're going to make sure the most vulnerable are taken care of. I'm not leaving them high and dry.
Could you take me inside a little bit how exactly it works at a time like this with your administration? I mean, do you have regular meetings with your top advisors? Are you constantly talking about this? Do you have, I don't know, emissaries to Washington? Are you talking to the legislative delegation about what they think is coming out of the Trump administration? I mean, take us inside, if you would, how exactly you're handling this on just like the day-to-day.
I knew a lot of guys in the Biden administration. It was easier. I'm getting relationships with some of the secretaries in the Trump administration. I'm trying my best to get an idea of where they think they're going. And then what I do with my commissioners is I say, let's say we're 50-50 on Medicaid, like I said. Let's say they want to go 70-30, and that would say cost us $500 million. What would that look like? Who would be impacted, and how do we address that? What if they said, we went with expanded Medicaid? Maybe you know about that. That carried a lot of people over and above the Medicaid income threshold. You know, that's probably $150 million. Who are those people if they just cut that off? And what are their other options? Is there only other option to pay full freight? What other things can we do? I'm modeling these things out right now. The only thing I beg of DOJ is don't do it overnight. Give us notice and do it slowly. Do big things slowly if you have to.
It's one of the interesting conversations in this job, in my day job. I work for Science Friday, the public radio show. We're constantly asking people questions really based on the idea that, you know, almost everybody who is in government that I've ever talked to has said, we can do things better. Right, like you said it probably when you came into office. It's how you do things, right? When you decide to make those changes, are you going to be kind about it? Are you going to give people time to actually adjust? What are some ways that you have seen, now that you've been at this job for a while, that you think like, man, government doesn't really work, and I really feel like there's something that could be done to substantively change it so that it's better, not in the sort of chainsaw doji way, but in a a thoughtful Ned Lamont-y way?
Well, I'd say I got to work with the legislature, and they're closest to the people. I would tell you that utilities and hospitals and universities, they get their money's worth out of lobbyists there. So it's tough for me to make real changes when that's regard. But I'll tell you one that I'm thinking about a lot these days. Our taxes are not unreasonable compared to other states that have an income tax. Our sales tax is about average. We cut $400 million of taxes for middle-class folks. I eliminated the income tax for essential workers and working folks. The tax that really is the crusher for us in the state of Connecticut is the property tax. I think you've heard that. And the property tax is brutal. You're on a fixed income, your property tax goes up, you don't have any place to go. There are a lot of reasons we have high property tax. So one of them is we have 169 towns. I love it. Every town is feisty, it's independent, they do their own thing. We also have 180 superintendents. New York City has one superintendent of schools, and they all have a deputy superintendent, and they have a curriculum officer as well. And we all have, first selectmen and purchasing and IT people as well. So as I talk to people, I say, look, I don't want to do anything to take away from the independence of our towns, but if you want to know where there's a possibility for real savings, at least try and regionalize some of those back office functions so we can bring down property tax and make this a more affordable state for everybody.
Do you ever wish that you had a less complicated state to run? Because there's states that are not run in this way, right? 169 towns and cities, all these different municipalities with all this essentially duplicative efforts. There's a lot of places in the country where it just doesn't run this way.
I love it. I get to go to a lot of towns, and I love the fact that how independent they are. But it's a little like on energy. I lay out your choices. You want to have everything under the control of your unique town, you're going to pay a 30% premium for that because that's just what it is to have that type of duplication. I'm working around the edges, but I can't hit it head on. We have these things called COGs because we don't like counties, and COG is Council of Government. So we're hiring, say a building inspector there. So your small town of Willimantic that can't hire a full-time building inspector will be able to access that person. That's how we get some back office savings there. But it's frustrating.
I have a couple more questions from people that I want to get to. As we've been doing this series throughout the course of months, consistently we have people from AARP in the room. I try not to take, my white beard tries not to take that too personally. But one of the questions that I got from a person from AARP has to do with the caregiver tax credit because of the enormous emotional and financial cost that caregivers of people in their family go through. Do you support a tax credit for caregivers?
I think I do. I mean, I'm the guy that's got to balance a budget, so I got to, price these things out. But I'm doing everything I can to allow our seniors, like my age, be able to stay at home. The nursing homes are great for those with acute care, but doing everything we can to make it easier for you to stay at home, have the wraparound services you need, the part-time nurse that gets more there, telehealth as well. And if a credit is one other way I can move people in that direction, I think it makes all the sense in the world. We had a tough time with our nursing homes during COVID. I mean, some of them were really good, and some of them were just the opposite, and there's a real mix there. And more and more I found people prefer the opportunity to stay at home if they can afford to do so and do it safely.
I got another question here from someone, and you talked...
What do you think, AARP? Is that about right? Just fishing for a break.
Yeah. You had talked about your universal pre-kindergarten plan. Could you talk about what exactly universal means? That's something that some folks
Universal means it would be absolutely no cost to any family earning $100,000 or less, and it'd be no more than $20 a day for people earning up to $200,000. Everybody else is sort of on their own. I love childcare for a number of reasons. Number one, I think it gives a kid the very best opportunity in life, and I think that's what we're all about. I like it, number two, because teachers tell me it makes an enormous difference. They can tell that kid that came from a quality childcare before getting into kindergarten. Number three, they tell me we have real escalating special needs. It's just exploding our budgets. A lot of kids really in need. They tell me, early childhood education, way to get to these kids earlier makes a big difference. And finally, as a business guy, I love the fact that business guys like it. They say it allows mom and dad to get back to work. It makes us the most family-friendly state in the country, so more young families want to be here. I'm all in.
So So a lot of people want to know if you're running for governor again. We talked about this last year at this time, and you seemed pretty certain that that was your plan. What are the factors that go through your mind when you think about whether or not you're going to do this again?
My factor is to stay away from that question as long as I can. But let me tell you why. I mean, I'm in the middle of budget negotiations. I got 187 legislators, and I've got 169 mayors, and each and every one of them come to my office every day, and they say, if you want my support, I want this community center, this, whatever it might be, this labor agreement. And I'm in a position right now where I say, look, I love the job, I love what we're doing, I think the state's doing okay, but I haven't made up my mind. I'm 71 years old, life marches on. What I'm going to do next. I'm going to get through this legislative session. I'm not going to be chained by politics. I'll get back to you in July.
I've asked several Connecticut lawmakers and top elected officials this question because several of them are in their 70s and getting older. And I guess a question is, at a certain point, do you think it's important to move aside and let someone else do the work? I think American politics, some would argue, and I know a lot of younger people argue, is somewhat problematic because of the age of the people who do the work. Now, 71 is not old in the world, but it's, you've been doing this for a while now. Do you think about that?
I think about the fact that J.D. Vance is really smart, doesn't have a clue about how the world works either at the age of 41. I think there are trade-offs in life.
That was a better answer than I guess I thought I was going to get. Okay, so a last thing, if money and things like the spending cap was not really an object, what's something here in the state that you'd most like to fix or some challenge that you'd most like to meet? And I'm asking this question in part because I had written about this when Jody Rell passed away. This past year, I had a conversation with her in her office once, and I asked her, I said, Governor Rell, what is the number one issue that you'd like to solve this year? And she said, those silly electronic billboards, I find them so distracting. And I thought at the time, wow, that's an unusual thing to think is the most important problem in the state of Connecticut. As I've gotten older, I've thought, boy, those damned electronic billboards are really annoying. But I guess I wonder about that. Do you think about man, if I could change something about this state, if I could fix some problem, what would I fix?
I'll tell you that last time I was here with Jody Rell, and she was really focused on civil society and how we could disagree agreeably. I'd like to talk about fixing things. I think we do that a little better in Connecticut than they do in Washington, D.C. and a lot of other places. And I'd like to get rid of those damn electronic billboards myself. I think they're ugly as sin and incredibly distracting. And if I have, one thing I really want to get done, it's all about the kids. And I really want to focus on the best education system in the world, make sure it's the best, and focus on those kids in early childhood education, give them the very best opportunity. I think if you do that at the end of the day, you look back, you left some footprints and made a difference.
How do you feel we're doing in those regards? Because I think one of the things that Connecticut has long been marked by is extraordinary schools for some kids in the state and not great schools for a lot of other kids in the state. And that has gotten better in some ways over the course of the last 20 years, but I think it's fair to say that gap is not closed.
Yeah, some of our, look, we got suburban schools, rural schools. Some of our urban schools are the best in the world, and we are blessed to have the very best teachers in the world in all of our schools. Some of our urban schools are having a hard time. They're having a hard time because these kids come from incredible trauma. It's just incredible, the kids in some of these cities, they've heard gunshots, somebody died, there's drug addiction, there's abuse going on, and they're taking everything into the classroom now. We're asking so much of our teachers and the paras. I'm doing mental health. We're doing counseling. I love coaches. I particularly love coaches. I love kids being part of a team and what that means. And we're trying to do that. But those are the kids I worry most about, those kids in some of the cities where they have amazing teachers, but they bring in so much into the classroom, it's tough for them to learn. But if you do me a favor, if you see a teacher, just thank them for being a teacher. You have no idea how hard they work and how complicated it is in this day and age and what a difference they make in kids' lives.
I think we all know a lot of teachers. I'm married to one, and I think it's important to thank them. You still like this job?
Yeah, I like it. Look, every day is something friggin' different.
There's a headline for you.
Everything, COVID, Trump. I mean, you just never know. It's just comes at you every day. I feel like, get the age. I've got a life experience. I've spent a lot of time in different situations. I've spent a lot of time in business and getting things done. And I like the fact that we're making progress. I think we're a state that's making progress. I think we were really down on ourselves as a state 10, 15 years ago. And last one out, turn out the light. And there goes GE and chronic fiscal crisis. And I need people to be as pumped up about the state as I am every day. And that's why I do what I do.
Ned Lamont, it's always good to see you. Thank you, Governor, for doing this.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
I want to thank everyone here at the University of Hartford. The folks at the University of Hartford have been absolutely great hosts. A big round of applause for them and everyone here. Go Hawks!
Go Hawks!
I also want to thank our generous financial supporters for our series, our presenting sponsor, Eversource, amplifying sponsors, CBIA and Mohegan Tribe, publishing sponsors, Express Strategies, Hinckley Allen, Rowthorn Law, LLC, and the Causeway Agency. Next up in our series, Jim Himes, our congressman from Fairfield County.
Great, he is so much better than me, you're going to love him.
He's going to be at the New Canaan Library. We're going to try to get Keith Richards to come down. Please visit ctmirror.org/events for details. Thanks, folks. Drive home safe. Thanks, Ned. Hey, I really appreciate it.
Great being with you. We had some fun.
Yeah, take good care, okay?